Hello, friends. I hope you're out wandering through nature, exploring the natural world around you. Do you enjoy writing about your wanderings? Nature journaling is an awesome, fun way to remember all the adventures you have taken and how you felt during those journeys. If you're looking for some beautiful journals to keep track of all your wanderings, I have several available on Amazon, including some guided journals for children. Start your journey in journaling by clicking on the link in the show notes. Keep exploring the nature around you and keep journaling all your wanderings. Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Nature Wanderer podcast. I'm sorry I went long last week. I didn't know if I could squeeze it in half an hour, and I saw that I was a little bit over, so I decided to make this a two-parter. We're going to talk again about how noise affects wildlife. I talked last week. If you didn't listen, go back and listen. I'm going to do a real quick recap here. I talked a little bit about how sudden sounds affect mating behaviors, flight responses, how animals are being disrupted by fireworks, but even constant noises. You know, places where there's a lot of traffic, noise from traffic, places where there's a lot of noise from construction or from businesses, different things that make a lot of noise and it's constant, how that affects wildlife. So we're going to get a little more in depth this week, and I also want to stick around for the end, because I want to talk about things that you can do and we can do as a society to kind of help the wildlife, to cut back on some of this noise. Now remember, we're talking sound, but this is the sound that we don't necessarily want. And yes, it is subjective, I will say that. I mentioned that in the first half of this episode, but I did mention last week how it is subjective. What I consider noise, you may not. What you consider noise, I may not. Maybe you think that handpan music, which I enjoy listening to, it's very relaxing. Maybe you think that's noise, it's annoying, it's disturbing. So we all have our limits on volume and noise, so it is subjective. I just wanted to let you know that. So find a comfy seat by the window to watch the birds or sit outside preferably, or maybe you're listening while you're on a hike, but keep listening and I'll be right back. So I want to start out this episode talking about ecosystem-wide consequences. So repeated noise disturbances. Like I mentioned earlier, maybe it's near a road, maybe it's near a construction area that's constantly doing constructions, maybe it's in an industrial area where there's a lot of machinery or air conditioners or fans or some sort of machinery that's making a lot of noise. So there's different ways that you can get repeated noise disturbances. And this can lead to long-term habitat abandonment. I mean, basically the wildlife doesn't want to live there. They don't want to be near that noise because it disturbs, well, we talked about it last week, their communication. It disturbed their nesting habits. It disturbed a lot of different things. And there's been studies that have shown how this has happened. In 2024, the USDA Forest Service, they did a study in the Bridger-Teton National Forest. During the study, they actually broadcast human recreation sounds. They found in the areas where they did this study, where they were broadcasting these human recreation sounds, people having fun, people, talking, people playing some music, people having a picnic. They had all these different recreation sounds from humans, and they found that wildlife were 3 to 5 times more likely to flee the area. And local wildlife presence fell by 50% in the following week. Half the wildlife left because of these noises. Can you imagine if they went longer with these noises? May have lost all the wildlife, but some wildlife can tolerate, maybe not enjoy, but tolerate these noises. Sound pollution. I used that term last week too. Okay, sound pollution contributes. We always think of pollution as being, land, air, water, but no, it's also sound pollution. Okay, noises, loud noises. Sound pollution contributes to ecosystem imbalance. It favors those species that can tolerate the noise over those who cannot. So you don't get the biodiversity anymore. So you get an imbalance in your species. Because of that, it also affects plants. I know you're wondering, what? Yes, it does affect plants. A lot of plants rely on birds, bats, or insects for pollination and seed dispersal. So the plants are depending on them to get their seeds out there in nature. They can't just take and toss their seeds. Some plants do. Okay, you ever walk through the jewelweed? Okay, or touch-me-nots, sometimes they're called. If you walk through them when they're at their seed phase, and as you walk through a patch of them, all these little seeds start popping out. It's a little mechanism they have to spread their seeds. But not all plants can do that, only a few. So when you have animals disappearing from an area, they're not coming into that area just to pick up some seeds and disperse them elsewhere. I mean, sometimes birds leave a seed when they're eating the fruit or whatever they're eating, the berries, and then they fly a distance and they drop that. Not the seeds in their mouths, but their droppings. So when they go to the bathroom, the seed is in there. It's got a casing on it to prevent it from being decayed rapidly. And it gets planted in the ground with fertilizer. So it will be dispersed. Sometimes a deer walking along will get one of those. I know we always hate it when they get stuck to our clothing, the briars, the little burrs, they get stuck on our clothing. Well, it gets stuck on deer fur, other animal fur, and it gets dispersed elsewhere when they clean themselves for the night. So all of these things are happening out there in nature. Seeds are being dispersed. Plants depend on that. And if you have fewer and fewer animals because they're driven away by the noise pollution, those animals, and a lot of times it's the animals that are very sensitive to stress or they communicate through sounds, those animals will avoid that noisy area, and the plants in that area don't get the seed dispersal. They end up dropping in numbers. They did a study in New Mexico many years ago, and they found that noise from gas well operations led to 75% fewer pine seedlings. The seed dispersing scrub jays avoided that noisy area where the gas well operations were happening. The seed dispersing scrub jays avoided the noisy areas, and therefore the seeds weren't being dispersed. So they found that there was 75% fewer pine seedlings because of that. Now they tried to do a recovery program, getting the seeds dispersed by hands. Humans were starting to plant these seedlings, but still after 12 years the recovery was incomplete because they didn't have the species that they needed, the scrub jays. The only thing they could have done is just stop the gas well operations to get those seedlings back. So it does affect areas, regeneration. And they did find in other studies too, this whole noise pollution thing, dropping plant communities. So it's not just certain birds, it's also insects, hummingbirds too. All of this, they were affected by the noise, they didn't avoid an area, and therefore plant community dynamics changed. Another thing they found is it wasn't just seed dispersal. They found that animals like rodents, some birds, and there are some insects, they influence soil aeration, nutrient cycling, and plant seed burial. If noise drove these species away, soil became less healthy and less diverse, changing which plants could grow there. So yes, plants are affected by all this. Now, I did mention that I would talk about how we can make a difference, how we can change this. Can we make our world silent? No, we can try. I don't know if it's going to work, but we can try. And some of the things that we can do, some simple things. Some are a little more difficult, but a lot of these are very simple. First of all, when you're in a natural area, be quiet. Yeah, just be quiet. A lot of times when my wife and I are hiking, especially when we're in, national forest or someplace, deep in the wilderness, we will hike in silence a lot of times. Or we'll whisper when we're talking. We're not talking loud. I have never done a hike with headphones in, or with a radio, or with my music playing on my phone. No, I'm always listening to nature. But I've talked about it before. I run into people all the time with their radios. I was in a rainforest down in Puerto Rico. And while I was down there in the rainforest, it's like we had a group of young people walking through, and this group of young people had a radio playing pretty loud. I mean, it was disrupting all the people who were trying to enjoy nature, but it was also disrupting nature. So please be quiet in natural areas. If you go for a hike, whether it's a town park, maybe there's traffic noise, but you don't have to contribute to that noise. Okay, so speak softly or remain silent on the trails. Like I said, my wife and I were usually talking quietly. I have a red-bellied woodpecker at my bird feeder here. Yeah, that's the type of sound I like to hear. But anyhow, we talk quietly when we're on the trails, or sometimes we just remain silent and listen to the birds, and then we'll be like, oh, that was this bird, oh, that was this bird. Yeah. So we're speaking softly, remain silent on the trails, especially in early morning and evening. That's when the wildlife is most active. In the heat of the day, middle of the day, they're not as active, but there could still be some animals out there. They're resting somewhere in a tree and you could disturb them. But mostly in the morning and the evening, that's when you really should be as silent as possible. Avoid playing music or using loud devices in parks, forests, or near wetlands. Okay, if you want to listen to your music, use headphones. Maybe you don't want to listen to the nature. To me, that's music to my ears, but like I said, subjective. Other people may just be out there for a hike, for exercise, and not care about absorbing the nature. In my opinion, just walk on the sidewalk somewhere. But whatever. To each his own. But please, if you're going to listen to music while you're out on a hike, use headphones. That way you're not disturbing other people and you're not disturbing the wildlife. So if you're in the park, forest, wetlands, yeah, avoid playing music. And you can also encourage, I'm not saying you can do this, maybe you can, maybe it's your property, but encourage quiet zones or sound sanctuaries, as some places call them, in local parks and nature reserves. Go to your town board and suggest, hey, this section of this park is really big with nesting birds, with wildlife. Can we make this a quiet zone? Maybe you're willing to pay for the signs to put up. All they have to do is declare it a quiet zone and allow it to happen and allow you to put the signs up, or they'll send someone over there to do it. So yeah, talk to your local parks and nature reserves and suggest that. Quiet zones and sound sanctuaries. I would go with the sound sanctuaries. It sounds kind of neat. And I think people might be like, oh, it's a sanctuary. We should be quiet in the sanctuary. Kind of like being in church. You should be quiet. So that's what I would do. I would call it a sound sanctuary. Use quiet equipment. That's the second thing you can do. Choose manual or electric tools, like push mowers or battery-powered leaf blowers. I have a leaf blower that I use to get the grass off my driveway here. It's a battery-operated one, and I actually put it on the lowest setting because it has different intensities for the breeze that's blowing out. I usually put on the lowest setting. It gets the leaves out. You know, it takes a little longer, but it's quieter. You know, and it's funny on this, especially like a Saturday morning sometimes here in my development. Everyone's got their lawnmowers out. You can tell who has electric lawnmowers. The first week we were here, I actually went over to my neighbor and I commented, says, "Wow, that's pretty quiet." Yeah, he's got an electric lawnmower, electric riding mower. It's very quiet. So yeah, try to get electric equipment instead of the noisy gas-powered polluting machines that we have. Guilty. I'm guilty. I have a gas-powered lawnmower. Most of my other equipment is battery-operated. Like my weed trimmer, which I don't use very often. I like to keep things natural in my yard. At some point I would like to get an electric lawnmower. So yeah, get manual electric equipment, lawn equipment and such. If you're doing landscaping or any maintenance, make sure you do it during daylight hours when it's less disruptive to the nocturnal or crepuscular, which means dusk and dawn. Okay, you don't want to disturb those wildlife. Okay, so the crepuscular and the nocturnal wildlife, make sure you do your lawn maintenance, anything that's going to make noise, do it during the day, and like midday is probably best. See, it's quiet enough this morning. I have a deer that's walking across the neighbor's yard right now. Okay, third thing, plan quiet recreation. Yeah, enjoy quiet activities like hiking, bird watching, kayaking, nature photography. I got a friend who does a lot of nature photography. Instead of doing motorized recreation like ATVs, jet skis, all these things that make loud noises. Like I said, used to live out in a rural area in the country. And you would hear every once in a while the ATVs going. In the wintertime, we were close to a snowmobile trail, and all the snowmobiles making a lot of noise. I know, they're fun. I did them as a kid, but it's like they disturb the wildlife. So try to find activities that are quieter. Quiet activities, quiet recreation. If you're camping, keep your campgrounds peaceful. Okay, avoid loud music, no shouting, no fireworks. Went to the beach the other day to relax, get a little calm, quiet time. And we have a beach that's not too far from us. I'm not a beach person, but I wanted to go there just because I knew it would be quiet. I could get some reading done. And my wife and I were on the beach, and then this family showed up, and they're so noisy and cursing and setting things up there. It's like, oh, let's be quiet. Yeah, so try to avoid that when you are camping or in a recreation area if you're having a picnic. Number 4, fourth thing you can do, rethink fireworks and loud celebrations. I know, we're so used to having fireworks on the 4th of July and New Year's Eve. We've got some new ways of changing that so that's quieter that we should start thinking about doing. And with the big fireworks displays, let's talk to our local municipalities and maybe they'll go along with it. Okay? There are quiet or silent alternatives like drone light shows or laser displays. I have seen some awesome drone light shows that blow away any fireworks display you could ever have. Now, talk to your community or your town and see if they're willing to reduce the fireworks that way, and don't push the sensitive wildlife. A lot of times they won't care about that, but talk about how it affects people too, the elderly, young children, babies who are trying to sleep. Talk about that you can talk a little bit about nesting seasons and all when you go to your public officials, but also talk about the expense. Some of these drone shows are a lot cheaper than if you buy all these fireworks. They're less polluting. So try to convince them. Maybe you can get some drone shows in your, or even laser displays. Now, another thing you can do is speak up, share your knowledge. Get people to listen to this episode and last week's too, of course. Get them to listen to these episodes about noise pollution. Educate your friends and family about how noise affects birds, mammals, the aquatic animals. See if they, will maybe be interested in stopping this noise. Advocate for noise buffer zones around parks, wetlands, and forests, like I said earlier. Get people, talk to your town. Maybe they'll have a designation of a certain area of your park to be a nice quiet zone, a quiet sanctuary. Okay, share your support for wildlife-friendly urban planning. Such as sound barriers near highways, or limits on industrial noise in sensitive zones. I had a friend many years ago. They were building I guess they were expanding a highway near us to get cars more efficiently down to the southern part of New York State. And part of it was going through this sensitive park. And he was advocating to have it moved a different location. Unfortunately, money spoke up. They did reroute the road down to this natural area, but during the construction, the poor wildlife in there. He was trying to find if there were any like bald eagle or endangered species nests so that, he could advocate that, now you have to reroute the road. But it never did happen, but he tried, and I give him a lot of credit for trying. He got a lot of people involved, a lot of newspapers involved. Another thing you can do is reduce noise in your home. Turn off outdoor speakers when they're not needed. Okay, close windows or insulate homes to limit outgoing sounds. Okay, that way if you have woods around your house, especially if you're in a rural area, if you live in a rural area, you don't want the noise from your house going out. If you have a noisy air conditioner, get it tuned up so it's quieter. Try to reduce the noise in your house. Use quiet hours in your neighborhood or advocate for them if they don't exist. I know a lot of towns have noise ordinances, so after like 10 o'clock and before 8 o'clock, I think it's kind of a given in most communities that, hey, you don't disturb anyone before 8 o'clock. Keep the noise down before 8 o'clock. So you're limiting the noise. Maybe advocate for longer noise quiet times. And the last thing I'm going to mention is drive quietly in wildlife areas. So when you're in a wildlife area, slow down, reduce the engine noise when you're passing through these sensitive areas. I remember when we were out west and we were driving our car, and we actually rented a hybrid, so it would be more energy efficient but also quieter too. But we went through some of the parks and stuff. You drove through them. And we just made sure we stayed quiet. We didn't rev our engine. We didn't, peel off at, a stop sign or, it's like, keeping it noise, or keeping it noise free, keeping it quiet. Another thing is keep your car radios low or off. How many times have you been walking down the road or driving down the road and you hear the boom, boom, boom? Some youngster is, blasting their radio, and they have the big bass speakers in there. Oh, we were in Puerto Rico. That's one of the few things I didn't like about Puerto Rico. Some of the cars, they've got these big sound systems on their roofs, and it's just blasting the noise, and the big, loud bass speakers. I mean, it's like, and even at nighttime, we went to this little art show in the little town we were staying at. They had a little nighttime or evening, I should say. It was around dinner time this evening. Art show every Wednesday, I think it was, and we decided to check it out the Wednesday we were there, and we went down there, and here's a couple of cars that go driving past and just blasting the noise. You can hear it for blocks away. It's like, oh my goodness, especially in the evening. This is disturbing the wildlife. But it was disturbing the people too. So keep your car radios low or off when you're driving through natural reserves, especially, or on rural roads. I mean, there's enough noise in the city that it's not a big deal, but still, it's nice to do it even in the cities. So those are my suggestions for you to help the wildlife. And you may ask, well, why does it matter? Like I said earlier, wildlife use sound to find mates, warn of danger, care for young, to navigate. Noise pollution can cause them to abandon habitats, suffer from chronic stress, or even fail to reproduce. Numbers have dropped in studies that in noisy areas. So there is proof out there. There is scientific proof about this. So even your small efforts can help animals stay calm, communicate clearly, and to thrive. Now, I am going a little long again. I still have a lot of notes here, but I'm going to just condense this last part. But I do want to get it in. How do you find quiet or noiseless natural places? Those of us who are trying to avoid the noise, I mean, I know when I'm recording a podcast, I'm usually looking for a nice quiet place to record it in. And I used to find some back when I lived out in the country. Now that I'm in a rural area, I do have some natural areas around me, and I will go to some of those to record podcasts. Today I decided to just do it on my back porch because I knew I'd get some silence, I'd get the birds, but I'd also get some of the road noise, and you'd understand what I'm talking about a little bit more. Because like I said, I'm not editing out these silly cars that are revving their engines at the stoplight. So how can you find these noiseless natural places? Well, first of all, explore protected areas that have sound management. There are some out there. Usually wilderness areas. The U.S. Wilderness Act land prohibit motorized vehicles, so you don't get that motor noise, the sound traffic noise. A lot of national parks have designated quiet zones like Olympic, Yellowstone, Zion. These areas are designated as quiet zones. They do everything they can to keep the noise out. I know they limit traffic in some of these parks too because of that. There's Audubon sanctuaries and nature preserves, some state natural areas that do limit human activity. Go online, use maps and websites to find these locations. Sometimes it's hard, but you can sometimes find noise-reduced areas. I'm still in search of the absolute quiet area. We have a park near us that pretty much, there's some areas that are away from the roads. You have to hike a little bit to get to them. They do have a section of road closed off, which is awesome. We hiked it the one day, and it's like much quieter up there. You get away from a lot of the road noise. But I was actually doing a recording up there the one day, and I had to edit out the helicopter that flew over, and then the jet that flew over. Then and then the people that were hiking and were a little bit noisier than they should have been. Now there are sound mapping tools out there you can use. There's resources. I'll try to put these in the show notes as long as I remember to. Natural sound maps. The U.S. National Park Service has some sound maps. There's Earth.fm. It's a platform with natural sound recordings tagged by location, often from quiet areas, so you can kind of find those locations that they use to do their sound recordings. Earth.fm. There is an app called Hush City app. I haven't checked it out yet. It's a community-sourced app that maps quiet places in cities and beyond. There's also a noise pollution map in Europe. So if you're in Europe or you are traveling to Europe, this tracks noise levels across European countries. Another thing you can do is you can visit places during off hours or off seasons. Like I said, it's my Sunday mornings on the back porch. Everyone's asleep. Yeah, everyone's still asleep early morning. No one's working. They're just quiet in here. No one's off driving, so we don't get the road noise. So go to these places during the early morning or on weekdays. Okay, a lot of public areas are very crowded on weekends, so go during the weekdays. Go during off season to avoid the crowds and the human noise. During winter time, okay, I know a lot of people don't like being outdoors in the winter, but hey, it's quiet out there. Post sunset, so without the light or heavy winds, often provide near silent soundscapes. So if you're seeking that, yeah, try these suggestions. Seek quiet parks and sound sanctuaries. Try to find out where those are. There's actually a website, www.quietparks.org. Go to that website and it will tell you, maybe hopefully there's some in your area. Start trying to convince people to make more of these. Now, when you're scouting out an area where it's going to be quiet, free from the noise, not sounds. I mean, I like to hear the nature. But if you're trying to avoid the noise, look for these clues, okay? Distance from roads, distances from air routes. You don't want to be near a population center. If you see that there's no power lines, motors or speakers around, then you know it's probably going to be quieter. If there's a lot of wildlife sounds, like bird song, frogs, rustling leaves, flowing water, you're probably getting to that silent area, or you're in it. Any absence of echoes of machinery or synthetic hums. I remember going to the rainforest, and we were deep in the rainforest when we were out west. The whole rainforest. And it's like you would be really quiet, but you still would hear people walking through the woods, and you would hear the hum of the air conditioner from the visitor center. You really had to go deep to get away from some of these things. So, I mean, remote forest trails, backcountry areas, deep ravines, be careful in all these areas, please. But they often shield against sound intrusion. Now, this quiet from the noise and just listening to the sounds of nature, I mean, it matters not just to the wildlife, it matters to us as well. Quiet places restore human mental health. It's been proven, okay, scientifically proven, restores human health, mental health, and also they have found it lowers stress and it will help you physically as well. Well, I hope you enjoyed learning about noise and how it affects wildlife and how it affects us too, and our pets. And hopefully you'll take some of my suggestions on how to prevent it, how to get away from the noise, but also how to make things quieter out there. I mean, maybe you're like me where you don't make a lot of noise in nature. Maybe you're not a contributor to this problem, but maybe you are and you didn't realize it. So start looking at your own habits. Do you listen to music without headphones while you're walking down a trail? Do you, talk loudly when you're having a picnic in a local park? Do you have music when you're in a natural area? Are you making noise? Rethink that. Try to make a change in your life. Try to encourage others to make a change. Well, I hope to see you back next week. Hope you enjoyed listening today. And if you want to support the podcast, do me a favor. Go to the links in the show notes. I also have some links to some of the websites I talked about in the podcast. But go to the show notes. There's links to my Ko-Fi page, to my online store where you can get some great merch. There's a link to my nature journals. You can buy them on Amazon. Check it out so that you can help support the podcast, keep it going. And I really hope you have a great week. Hope to see you back next week. Bring some friends along. That's the best thing you can do, is bring some friends to listen so that they'll start enjoying nature more and they'll start understanding nature more. But above all, keep exploring the nature around you. Hey there, fellow nature wanderers. If you're like me, you love spending time outdoors, breathing in that fresh air and connecting with the natural world. But at home, have you ever thought about what's in the products you use every single day? That's why I'm excited to share Apple Valley Natural Soap with you. Their handcrafted all-natural soaps are made with organic ingredients, essential oils, and no harsh chemicals. Awesome! So they're not only great for your skin, but they're safe for the planet. And they don't just stop at soap. Apple Valley Natural Soap also carries a full line of natural skincare products, including shampoos, body butters, facial bars, and more. All designed to nourish your skin without synthetic ingredients. You can't beat that. That's just awesome. Whether you're hiking in the woods or just winding down after a long day, their products bring a little bit of nature right into your home. And the best part? By supporting Apple Valley Natural Soap through The Nature Wanderer, you're also supporting this podcast. Just head to the show notes and click on the link for Apple Valley Natural Soap. So go ahead, treat yourself and the environment to something better. Your skin and Mother Nature will thank you. Now let's get on with our adventure.